All my life, I've really wanted people to view me as a strong woman. Yeah, started early off when I was just a little girl. And back then, my rules for being a strong woman were pretty simple, which was just like, be really strong, which was super easy because I build muscle pretty quickly, and also I experienced a growth spurt way earlier than pretty much everyone else in my class. So I ran faster than everyone, I jumped higher, I was really good at sports, and it was totally awesome until about 5th grade when everyone else caught up, and suddenly I just didn't seem that strong anymore. So I had to rethink this whole idea of what it meant to be a strong woman. And then around late middle school, I discovered this concept called feminism. Yeah. Truth be told, I have absolutely no idea how I stumbled across it. I grew up in a town of less than 500 people in northern Wisconsin that's not exactly known for its progressive politics. Feminism is still a dirty word there. So what I'm saying is, I don't know where I came across it, and also I didn't have a lot of good role models for it. And so my ideas about what feminism was were maybe a little bit misguided. So my rules for being a feminist were, first off, feminists did not dress like girls. So that meant that I wore a lot of button-fly jeans and no fear t-shirts, which was awesome. And also, feminists did not have like schoolgirl crushes on boys. So that meant when my classmate Stacy Oatman would come to school and like talk about how in love with Hanson she was, I would sit there and roll my eyes instead of admitting that I had pages upon pages upon pages upon pages in my diary, all about how maybe someday I would travel to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Hanson is from, and I would like run into Taylor Hanson, the lead singer, on the street, and we would like know that there was a connection immediately, and we would fall in love, and then we would get married. But the thing is, feminists don't marry Taylor Hanson, so I just couldn't tell anyone that. And then the third thing was, I have no idea where I got this, but I felt really strongly that feminists were vegetarians. And so I became like a die-hard vegetarian while I was in middle school. And for whatever reason, my parents were pretty accepting of this. They were like, whatever, Leah's just decided something else. And it was going pretty well for a while. It was pretty easy until one night we had taco night at my house, which something to know about me is I love food in general, like most people, but I especially really love ground beef. Especially taco-flavored ground beef. It's like my kryptonite. So this was a really, really difficult night for me, and I was super impressed with myself because I made it all the way through dinner, only eating veggie tacos and pretending to like it the whole time. And then I went to bed, a good feminist, and I did my homework, and the thing is, I just couldn't go to sleep. I just continued to think about this ground beef, like, forever, and I just laid in bed until finally when I knew everyone else would be asleep, I just like quietly crept downstairs and I opened up the refrigerator slowly and got out the huge thing of Tupperware of ground beef because my mom always made too much food, and then I grabbed it and I snuck to like the furthest corner of the house to the closet there, and I shut myself in the closet and sat on this pile of snow boots and gloves, and I just like shoved ground beef into my mouth by the handful, and it was so amazing, you guys. For like the first 30 seconds, it was the best until I realized what I was doing, and like I was betraying my vegetarianism and like feminism like in general. And in that moment I realized, you know, maybe feminism just isn't really for me. And so I took a break from it for a while, and like I went on to college, and instead I dabbled in things like frat parties and jello wrestling, and like I don't know of the appropriate euphemism, so I'll say like character building activities. And I went through that phase. Then when I decided to move to my early 20s, or move to Portland in my early 20s, I'm like, okay, it's time to like get back on that strong woman train and like regain my feminist footing. But this time I had a new set of rules for myself about what that meant. And the first one was that feminists worked with their hands. Like, they knew how to build things. They knew how to fix things. I knew that was an important part of it, and I was committing to learning more of it. And the second was that feminists did not date bros, okay? And so, what I mean by bros is like the kind of guy that like really likes looking at pictures of women in bikinis and like wears pink polo shirts with the collars popped and like calls all of his male friends bro, like also known as like my college boyfriend. So that wasn't something I was gonna do. And then the third thing I knew is that feminists were in control of their life, in control of the scenario they were in, just in control in general. So I moved to Portland and got things started off on the right foot immediately. On the third day that I was here, I followed my older brother Brian to work. And at the time, he was the volunteer coordinator at a little place called the Community Cycling Center. Yeah. So I followed him out on a Tuesday night to volunteer wrench night, where we helped refurbish bikes for kids for the holiday bike drive. It was great. You know, I was learning my skills. I was doing my hands-on feminist thing. And also, while I was there, I met one of his coworkers. Yeah. And this guy was one of the weirdest people I'd ever met. Like, he was wearing this amazing, ironic trucker cap, this t-shirt that had this really graphic picture of like glittery galloping ponies, and also this enormous skull necklace. And I was like, oh man, this is my not bro. This is like my guy. And I was smitten immediately. So over the course of the next few weeks, we started hanging out, and it was just as perfect as I thought it might be. For our first date, we went to the Goodwill bins, where we rifled through like other people's trash, basically, to find gifts for ourselves. I got a framed portrait of a cheeseburger, still have it. And then we went to an abandoned semi, and we sat on the roof and ate burritos. Then he took me to the Zubon mini bike winter, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. But then, one day, out of the blue, I got this call from him, and he's like, hey, I got an idea for something we could do next time we hang out. He's like, what would you think about going on a tandem bicycle ride? And so, yeah. So I did what any reasonable adult would do in that situation, and I pretended that there was a bad connection and hung up on him immediately. Because in my mind, riding a tandem was like the antithesis of being in control. Because on a good day, I'm maybe 5'4", and he's like 6 feet tall, and I knew I was gonna have to ride in the back. And also, I just moved to Portland. I had no idea where anything was, so he was gonna lead us around, and I was just gonna be like the girl sitting back there and behind. So, as I usually do, I called my brother for advice and to be like, can you believe he would ask such a thing of me? And Brian was like, yeah, and maybe you're a little crazy. And I was like, well, he's clearly not a feminist. And so then I called some other friends, and shockingly, they had a similar reaction. So I was like, okay, I know what I gotta do. And so I decided I would put a lifetime of training in Midwestern passive aggression to use, and I would go on the bike ride with him, but I would do my best to make sure that he knew that I wasn't enjoying it without like saying that I wasn't enjoying it, like just so that he would never ever ask me to do such a thing again. So I called him back and I was like, yeah, I'm down for the tandem ride. So I show up at his house the day of, and he wheels the tandem around to the front of the house, and you guys, this bike was amazing. It was a teal to purple fade with top tube pads from kids' bikes that said things like Slumber Party and Jazz Cats. And these huge baskets on the front and the rear, and best of all, this radio that was blaring pop music, and I love pop music. But I couldn't let him know that I was enjoying it, so when he's like, so what do you think of the bike? I'm like, whatever. It's fine, I guess. We get on the bike and get riding, and then I'm like, so where are we going? He's like, oh, I thought we would like go up and ride in the West Hills. And again, I'm like trying to contain my excitement, but also I'm like, I love hills. I love them. So I'm like, he's doing all the right things, but I can't let him know because, you know, it's a tandem. So we ride through the West Hills, and it's really beautiful. He's pointing out all the sights, and it's amazing, but I can't tell him that. And then finally, we get up to the top of Washington Park by the zoo. And he's like, what if we take a little break here? I'm like, okay, fine, whatever, I don't care. And while we're there, he goes into the back basket of the tandem and pulls out my other version of kryptonite, which was a bag of donuts. And at that moment, I feel like I realized how stupid I was being. And finally, just as I was digging into the donuts and realized, like, this is actually really fun. I don't need to continue pretending. And so we got back on the bike. And as we started to descend out of the park, I wrapped my arms around his waist, which you can do when you're the back person on the tandem, which is sweet. And so I wrapped my arms around this guy who would one day turn me into a bit of a bike nerd myself, who would support and encourage me as I decided to open up my own bike shop, and who still is right there with me today. Hey, buddy. And I decided to finally let go of control, and I closed my eyes. And as we barreled down and leaned through the corners and just plummeted down the straightaways, it felt a little bit like I was flying and a whole lot like I was falling in love. Thanks.